In 2024, something unbelievable happened. A company that once made graphics cards for gamers became one of the most valuable companies in the world. For decades, the biggest names in technology were Apple, Microsoft, and Amazon. Then, NVIDIA joined them. A company that most people once associated with video games suddenly became the engine powering the artificial intelligence revolution. But here's the question. How did that happen? How did a small startup, founded by 3 engineers, become the company every AI giant depends on today? The answer isn't luck, it isn't timing, and it definitely wasn't an overnight success. It started over 30 years ago, not inside a billion-dollar office, not inside Silicon Valley's biggest company, but inside a simple Denny's restaurant. It's 1993. 3 engineers sit together over breakfast. Their names are Jensen Huang, Chris Malachowski, and Curtis Preem. They weren't celebrities. They weren't billionaires. And they certainly weren't building what people imagined would become one of the most important companies in history. All they had was an idea. At the time, personal computers were becoming more popular every year, but graphics were still an afterthought. Most people used their computers for documents, spreadsheets, and simple games. The graphics processor, or GPU, was considered a tiny niche. Intel dominated computer processors. Microsoft ruled software. No one was asking for faster graphics, and almost nobody believed graphics processors could become a massive business. But Jensen Huang saw something everyone else missed. He believed graphics would become increasingly important, not just for games, but for the future of computing itself. It was a bold prediction, one that almost nobody believed. So the 3 founders took a risk. They started NVIDIA. There were no luxurious offices, no endless funding, no guarantee that customers would even care about what they were building. Every dollar mattered. Every decision mattered. Every mistake could be fatal. Like every startup, NVIDIA had to prove it deserved to exist, and very quickly, things started going wrong. The company's early products failed to impress customers. Some launched too late. Others simply couldn't compete. Money disappeared faster than it arrived. Investors became nervous. Customers looked elsewhere. Inside the company, pressure continued to grow. Every month, the bank account became smaller. Employees still needed salaries. Suppliers still expected payments. Bills never stopped arriving. But sales weren't enough. Years later, Jensen Huang revealed just how close the company came to disappearing forever. NVIDIA was only about 30 days away from going out of business. Think about that. 30 days, one more failed product, and everything they had built would have vanished. Imagine spending years chasing your dream, only to realize it might all end within a month. For the employees, this wasn't just another struggling startup. It was their future, their careers, their families. Failure wasn't simply an option on a balance sheet. It was personal. And while NVIDIA struggled, their competitors kept moving forward. Larger companies had more money, more engineers, more resources. Every mistake NVIDIA made everyone else stronger. The pressure was overwhelming. But instead of giving up, Jensen Huang made one final gamble. The company stopped trying to improve its failing products and focused everything on building something completely new. That graphics chip became known as the Riva 128. It wasn't just another product. It was a lifeline. If it failed, NVIDIA would almost certainly disappear. Months of work, countless sleepless nights, and the future of the company all depended on a single launch. Then, something incredible happened. The Riva 128 became one of the fastest graphics chips on the market. Customers loved it. Sales exploded. Cash finally started flowing into the company. For the first time, NVIDIA could breathe again. Against all odds, they had survived. Most companies, after coming that close to bankruptcy, would have become more careful. They would protect their profits, avoid unnecessary risks, and slowly grow their business. It would have been the safe decision, the logical decision, the decision every investor wanted. But Jensen Huang wasn't interested in playing it safe, because while everyone else was thinking about the next graphics card, he was already thinking about something much bigger, something that, at the time, sounded almost impossible. He believed graphics processors could one day do far more than create beautiful video games. He believed they could solve scientific problems, power medical research, simulate the universe, and perhaps even think. It sounded ridiculous. Almost everyone dismissed the idea. But Jensen Huang didn't care, because sometimes the biggest opportunities look like the biggest mistakes, and that single decision would eventually change not only NVIDIA, but the future of artificial intelligence itself. Most CEOs, after surviving bankruptcy, would never risk everything again. But Jensen Huang wasn't most CEOs. Instead of asking, "How can we sell more graphics cards?" he asked a completely different question. What if graphics processors could solve problems that had nothing to do with graphics? It sounded crazy. After all, GPUs were designed to draw pixels on a screen. They made video games look beautiful. That was their job. At least, that's what everyone believed. But Jensen Huang believed something different. He believed that inside every graphics processor was an incredible amount of untapped computing power. Power that could solve thousands of mathematical problems, all at the same time. Traditional computer processors, known as CPUs, were incredibly intelligent. But they were built to perform a few tasks, one after another. GPUs worked differently. Instead of thinking like a single brilliant worker, they behaved like thousands of workers solving different pieces of the same puzzle, simultaneously. That tiny difference would eventually change the world. In 2006, NVIDIA introduced a platform called CUDA. To most people, it looked boring. It wasn't a flashy graphics card. It wasn't a new gaming console. It wasn't something customers could proudly show their friends. It was software, a tool that allowed programmers to use NVIDIA's graphics processors for almost any type of computation: medical research, weather prediction, physics simulations, scientific computing, artificial intelligence. The possibilities seemed endless, but there was one problem. Almost nobody cared. Wall Street didn't understand it. Gamers didn't need it. Many investors questioned why NVIDIA was spending so much money, building something that wasn't making billions of dollars. Some people believed Jensen Huang was wasting valuable resources. Others thought NVIDIA should focus only on gaming. From the outside, it looked like a terrible business decision. But Jensen wasn't building for today. He was building for a future that hadn't arrived yet. Years passed, 2 years, 5 years, almost 10 years, and NVIDIA kept investing, even when the rewards weren't obvious, even when analysts questioned every dollar spent on research, even when competitors ignored the entire idea. Jensen Huang never stopped believing, because sometimes the hardest part of building the future is waiting for the rest of the world to catch up. Then, everything changed. In 2012, a group of researchers entered an artificial intelligence competition called ImageNet. Instead of relying only on traditional computer processors, they trained their neural network using NVIDIA GPUs. The results shocked the scientific community. Their AI model wasn't just a little better, it was dramatically better. Suddenly, researchers around the world realized something extraordinary. Graphics processors weren't just good at rendering video games. They were incredibly powerful at training artificial intelligence. It was the moment Jensen Huang had been waiting for. The future he imagined years earlier was finally becoming reality. Still, most people outside the technology industry had no idea what NVIDIA was doing. That would change 10 years later. On November 30th, 2022. OpenAI released ChatGPT. Within days, millions of people were asking an AI questions, writing essays, creating computer code, and imagining a future that suddenly felt much closer than anyone expected. Artificial intelligence was no longer something hidden inside research laboratories. It had arrived in everyday life. But behind every conversation, every generated image, every line of AI-generated code, there was a massive amount of computing power. And that computing power came from NVIDIA. Almost overnight, the biggest technology companies on Earth started racing toward the same destination. Microsoft, Google, Amazon, Meta, Tesla. Every one of them wanted more NVIDIA GPUs, not hundreds, not thousands, sometimes tens of thousands at a time. Entire data centers, worth billions of dollars, were built around NVIDIA's technology. Factories struggled to keep up. Customers waited months for deliveries. The graphics cards that were once designed for gamers had become the fuel powering the AI revolution. And suddenly, everyone understood. CUDA wasn't a waste of money. It wasn't a distraction. It wasn't a mistake. It was one of the greatest long-term investments in modern technology. Everything Jensen Huang had spent decades building was finally paying off. People called NVIDIA an overnight success, but overnight success doesn't take 30 years. It doesn't survive bankruptcy. It doesn't spend decades building technology before the world understands why it matters. What looked like luck was actually preparation. Year after year, decision after decision, risk after risk. While everyone else was chasing today's opportunities, Jensen Huang kept preparing for tomorrow. And when tomorrow finally arrived, NVIDIA was already there, waiting. Today, whether you're talking to an AI assistant, watching a self-driving car learn its surroundings, discovering a new medicine, creating a movie, or training the next generation of intelligent robots, there's a good chance NVIDIA is somewhere behind the scenes, not because they got lucky, but because they spent decades preparing for a future that almost nobody else believed in. Maybe that's the real lesson behind NVIDIA's story. The biggest breakthroughs rarely look obvious when they begin. Most people wait until the future becomes clear. Visionaries don't. They build it while everyone else is still doubting them. Back in 1993, 3 engineers sat inside a Denny's restaurant with nothing more than an idea. They had no certainty, no guarantees, no way of knowing that one day their company would help power one of the greatest technological revolutions in human history. Yet they built it anyway, because sometimes the future belongs to the people willing to believe in it, long before everyone else can see it. And maybe the next world-changing idea is being dismissed right now. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the Growth Files for more documentaries about the companies, inventions, and people shaping our future.